So Ravana goes to his uncle Marisha. Marisha is a shapeshifter. And so Ravana said, look, what I want you to do is to take on the form of a beautiful golden deer and steal Sita away. But Marisha was afraid of Ram, and he tried to get Ravana to stay away from him. But Ravana kept pushing. Remember again, Ravana had that initial boon that said he could not be harmed by gods or demons, and so he felt pretty secure in his position. I mean, what could a human or an animal do to him? He didn't have to worry about them. And after all, Ram is only a human. He might have a divine bow, but he's a human being. So why should I worry about him? Ravana says, look, Marisha, you got two options. You either transform into this golden deer and help me steal Sita away, or I'm going to kill you. Those are the two choices you got. So given those options, Marisha decided to take the first one, and he transformed himself into that state of the golden deer, which of course caught Sita's eye. She found it very attractive. Marisha takes the form and takes on a voice too of this beautiful golden deer and begins to graze near Ram's hut. Sita is immediately attracted to the deer and asks Ram to capture it for her. Now Lakshman's a little more cautious, and he says, this deer could be a trap, could be a demon in disguise. But Ram had already started off after the deer because he wanted to please Sita, he wanted to make her happy. Well, soon, Ram is going to realize that Lakshman was right. The deer was a disguised demon. So he takes his bow and he shoots the deer in the distance. And as soon as Marisha is shot, the illusion is broken, and everybody can see this demon for what he really was. But before he died, Marisha is going to imitate Ram's voice, and he shouts for Sita and Lakshman to come and help him. Sita will recognize Ram's voice, and she starts begging Lakshman, look, Rama's calling for our help. We've got to go aid him. We've got to go help him. But he was suspicious. I mean, after all, even if others don't realize it, even if Ravana doesn't know it, Lakshman knows who Ram is. Ram is God. He's invincible. Why is he going to yell for help? But still, Sita is going to insist. And so Lakshman leaves. But before he does, draws a circle around the hut and says that as long as Sita remains in the circle, she will be safe within the grace of God. It's kind of a wonderful metaphor that's being used there. The circle of inclusion, the embrace of the divine, So here is this circle that's being placed around. And this is something that we see in Eastern philosophies, we see it in Native American traditions, we see it in a lot of pagan cultures. The idea that a person can go inside of this circle and there's a safety within there, that the forces of evil can't penetrate the boundary of that circle to where they're able to attack. And so the person that stays inside of that circle will be safe no matter what. And so Lakshman wanted to make sure she was safe, got her inside of that place, and then he goes off to try to see what the situation is with Ram. While all of this is happening, Ravana had been watching from nearby, and as soon as he saw that Sita was alone, Ravana disguises himself as a hermit and approaches the hut. Now, of course, because of that line of protection, because of that circle, Ravana couldn't get directly to her. He had to stay behind the line of protection. But since he had gone in the guise of a hermit, with a begging bowl, and he's asking for alms, according to this culture, if a mendicant of some sort comes forward seeking alms, offering trying to get some type of food or whatever, it is very bad fortune, very bad luck to refuse that person. And so she knows this, and so does he. And that's why he's taking on that guise. So she thinks, okay, well, I have to provide the alms for this individual. And so she brings out a bowl of rice. But he's not able to cross that boundary. And so he asks her to come closer and to present him directly with the offering. Now Sita, she's weary. She doesn't want to cross the line. So Ravana started to make a way to leave. But Sita felt sorry for the old man, thinking, what if this really is a holy man? What if this is a mendicant and I'm abusing him by not making this offering? And so that was enough to tempt her across the line. She brought the bowl of rice out and handed it directly to him. As soon as she did that, as soon as she was on this side of the line, outside of the circle, Ravana pounces on Sita. He clutches her by the hands, grabs hold of her, and he introduces his real self. He says, I am Ravana, I am the king of Lanka, and I demand that you become my queen. And so in that way, Sita is going to be stolen away by the evil demon. Sita was placed in the chariot, taken back to Lanka. Now, when Ram saw Lakshman approaching, he became very concerned, and he said, well, where's Sita? Why have you left her alone? And he explains that, well, we'd heard your voice calling for help. I came out to see you. And so they raced their way back to that hut. But when they got there, of course, they found the hut was empty. They began to search all the place, trying to figure out what had happened. And then they hear this cry coming from the sky. And it was a cry of a figure called Jatayu. Jatayu, who is the king of the eagles. He was a friend of Ram's father, Dasharat. And Jatayu told Ram of the abduction. He told him exactly what happened and how Ravana had managed to spirit Sita away. Jatayu tried to help, but Ravana cut his wings so he couldn't. And so he simply had to watch as Ravana and Sita flew on south. Shortly after this, Jatayu died and was buried. And after that, Ram and Lakshman are going to head south on a mission to retrieve Sita, to bring her back home, to bring her back to safety. On the road, they're going to meet Banda. Banda is a demon who at first tries to eat them, but Ram's arrow. And after this happens, we discover that Kabanda was actually cursed. That's why he was a monster. That's why he came out in this way. But he was actually a very, very beautiful figure. We see he's been struck down by Ram's arrow, which breaks the curse so that we can see his true nature. But unfortunately, because of he dies. And so Ram is going to burn him to ashes. But afterwards, he regains that original true form. He is very grateful for this. And so he wants to help in this quest. So Kabanda is going to say to Ram that what you need to do is to seek the help of King Sugrive. King Sugrive is the king of the monkeys. Okay? Remember how I said back at the beginning that since Ravana cannot be defeated by gods or demons, he's going to have to be defeated by humans and animals. And so we're going to have, Ram in this world in human form, and we're going to have Hanuman, who comes to us as the monkey incarnation of Shiva. But there are other monkeys, there are bears, there are other animals who are going to participate in this as well. But anyway, Kabanda says, go find King Sugrive. Go find the king of the monkeys. and he will give you help to reclaim Sita. Now, at this point, we see Sita sitting in this grove under a tree, and she's surrounded by other individuals, but really feeling completely alone. The point that Sita's at in this story is the point where a lot of people are metaphorically. Sita's imprisoned in a grove of trees behind Ravana's palace. She is separated by an ocean from Ram, right? Because that's where Lanka is. It's across the ocean from Ayodhya. And so there's an ocean separating them. There's this huge gap, this huge distance between her and her husband. There's a separation, therefore, that's keeping apart the masculine and feminine aspect of the divine, keeping the divine from unifying itself and joining itself together. A lot of people in the world, and that's kind of the metaphor that we're seeing with this, a lot of people see themselves at that point. They see that there is an ocean between themselves and the divine. When people become spiritually awake, they start to feel that way. I want to be over here where God is, but I'm stuck over here, miles away, kilometers away, an ocean away. And so a lot of readers really identify with Sita as she sits there in this garden. Now, Sita's in this grove because she refuses to enter Ravana's palace. Even the Ravana is trying to tempt her. Look, you can come into this palace where there's all of these lavishes and pleasures. You can take on the role and be my queen. You can have power. You can have position. He's trying everything that he can to try to get Sita to forget Ram, to give in to his desire, to make life easier on herself, to enjoy herself. But she refuses to do it. She will not step foot inside of his palace, and so she remains out there in the grove. She tries to keep her mind focused on God, but she's going to face a crisis of faith here. She doesn't know whether Ram's out looking for her. She doesn't know if he's been tricked in some way, if he realizes that she's missing, if he's been killed. She has no idea. But of course, we know that Ram is out looking for her. We know that the search is on and that eventually he will find her. But she's questioning all of these things as she sits there. And that puts her into a very sorry and rather depressed state. As Ram and Lakshman travel on, they meet Sugrive, who is an old hermit woman. So again, another one of those strange areas where there's very similar spellings. Surgrive and Sugrive. Surgrive, Surgriva, is the old hermit woman that he meets at this point. Sugrive, Sugriva, is the king of the monkeys. Very similar names at roughly the same time in the story, so it makes it a little bit confusing. But anyway, they come across this old hermit woman, and many years ago, she wanted to die when her guru died. But she was told that she would not be allowed to do that because she had a duty to perform. She had dharma that was unfulfilled. Her job was to wait until Ram came. She was told that Ram would be coming seeking Sita, and that she has to be there to explain to him and tell him about Hanuman. So she had to hold on and survive for that specific reason so she could act as that messenger. So Sugriva has spent her entire life waiting for Ram. She attempted to make sure that everything was ready at any given moment. Even the sages started to make fun of her. Do you think Ram's going to come today? Why are you sitting around just waiting to get on with your life? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? But her focus was always on waiting and making sure that everything is prepared for Ram's arrival, no matter how much they taunted her. So when Ram finally appeared, Sugrive was overjoyed. She could finally fulfill her duty. And so she explained to Ram about Hanuman. She told him that Hanuman was a monkey born of the wind, a being who has every kind of power imaginable, but that he doesn't know his own abilities. Again, we talked about that a few weeks ago. That's one of the most important aspects of Hanuman, the fact that as a divine being, he has so much power, so much ability. He can do anything. We see him eventually in the story grow to massive size. We see him not be affected by moving through fire. We see him leaping, jumping across vast oceans. We see him ripping his chest open. He's doing so many different things. But yet, he doesn't remember that he has the ability to do them, because there's so much humility there that he never thinks from his own standpoint. He never thinks of using those abilities and those powers for his own end. He is that embodiment of humility that can act as an exemplar for how all individuals should act in the presence of the divine. Now, Sugrive